I didn't expect a win. I really didn't. But Thomas Brown, it's definitely clear now that he is not going to be the guy here moving forward. In fact, I was absolutely disgusted with, with initially the first drive. It's 4th and 1 on like your own 40,
Mm-hmm.
and you go for it. You toss it to the side of the left tackle you have in there, your backup left tackle, who hasn't been very good at that position, to try and pick up a yard, and you just literally give the ball to the Vikings so they could kick a field goal and go up 3-0 right away. Like you're facing an 11-2 team, and you're just going to let them start 3 points up.
There was
To
some
me,
Shane Waldron there again.
I can't make sense of it. I really can't.
To start with a toss on 4th and 1 and toss it 5 yards back to trying to gain one is absolutely ridiculous. I get maybe you're depleted on offensive line, but figure it out. Other teams do. And then the other 4th and 1 situation where they have 2 pulling players. They have Gerald Everett, who is not a blocking tight end, slide along, picking up the left tackle coverage, and then the left tackle, left guard, kick out and do a running across the and then they're doing a pulling run where the left guard and left tackle pull and run across to the right side of the line to gain 1 yard. It's very Shane Waldron-y. It's not as bad, but all of it is just, I think whatever this offense is, whatever this mental hurdle that is the curse on the Chicago Bears, it's all the same. It looks all the same.
The pushback that I have gotten has been like, well, you need to develop chemistry with these guys. Dude, it's week 15. If you haven't figured out how to have chemistry with Cole Kmet yet, you're not about to do it in these last 3 games. You're just not. Like that's an excuse. It really is.
There's a fundamental issue too with the coaching where you have Kieran out there, Amagaji, and you know what he is and you know what his situation is. He's a left tackle in his rookie year. And there was multiple times where I saw Cole Kmet on the edge of that line, and you don't see a chip block. You don't see a running back stand. Towards the end of the game, they started going into some max protection stuff, running like 2 routes, 3 routes. By then it was too late, and it was just too stupid. But there's just some fundamental issues with the game being too big for everybody in that whole building right now. The game of football is too complicated. They overthink and outthink themselves, and it's a catastrophe. Luckily, it's just, I try not to get emotional at these games anymore, and I've been better about it, but there's still moments where I see something so stupid that it's football 101, and I just don't understand how you can be at this level and not understand that and do a better job at it.
During the offseason, Blasting Game was still on this roster at one point, and I was sitting there asking, well, is there even room for a fullback on this offense? Like, is that what they're gonna do? And here they go. They get rid of him. Now you use your backup center as a fullback over and over and over. Dude, like, he didn't report. He's a center, man. Like, yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, like, I blame him, but like, stop putting guys in positions to do things that they're not there to do. This season's done. I don't even care that much anymore. I wouldn't even get this detailed. But you're still out there ruining the number 1 overall pick.
I think right now, that's why so much of my attention is just posted towards the future, because I just don't think it's worth really talking too much about this season. I don't think you're going to gain anything, like we've been saying. Roma Dunze is Roma Dunze. Caleb is Caleb. I think we've seen 14 games of them, and sure, cool. Like, the best case scenario is we see a game where Caleb goes for like 400 yards and 4 touchdowns, isn't it? And that's the best case scenario. That's just something cool to talk about. But the likelihood of that happening is what, less than 10% probably. Right.
Oh, so, yeah, I'd say even less than that, man. Like, if I had to bet on it, I would be thinking, what, I don't know, 3 to 5%.
Yeah, because the teams that are left, it's Green Bay, Detroit, and Seattle, all of them with great defenses. It's not really the point. That's why I'm saying it's just more about like my focus on the future. And then just this comment here real quick. Dennis Moody saying, like, if Ben Johnson came here and drafted Ashton Genty, I would be boycotting the season. I wouldn't watch a single game. I just couldn't do it unless they just paid for every free agent offensive lineman in the NFL. And then let's just not talk about that, please. Blackwell as punt returner. I don't know if Blackwell's going to be on this team because who knows who the next head coach is. And if Blackwell is that cheap, he's probably going to get paid a little bit more by another team because he's actually a pretty decent player. Sorry, Carl. Josh Blackwell might be gone next year. I think he's on
just to address that, because I really like Dennis. He always participates in the chat and he makes some good points. I mean, I think we've done it during the offseason. I'm sure we'll do it again. In general, just drafting a running back in the first round or high in the first round is such a bad idea for team building move, period. Like, I don't care what his name is. Even the guys that do work out don't get a Super Bowl ring, right? Like,
running backs are such a luxury, and this season in the NFL is demonstrating it to you so hard. The 3 best running backs in the NFL are 27, 30 years old, and 27 or 28 years old. All of them on their second team, all of them on their second contracts, and they are a luxury because they were players that Super Bowl ready teams already were just like, you know what'll take us over the top? Fuck it. Let's go spend some money on a running back because we already have everything everywhere else. So it's not something that you invest early off first round picks. We're talking about a top 6 pick at this point, top 5 pick possibly. You do not invest that. Statistically, me and Paulie, maybe we need to do another episode of this in the next offseason just to beat the point into the ground, come with more graphics and stuff. We've done this research. If you look at running backs, wide receivers, skill position players, you can get those guys 3rd round, 4th round, 5th round, 6th round. There is not one, maybe one every 5 years where an offensive lineman or a defensive lineman actually comes out of something other than the 1st or 2nd round. It just doesn't happen.
Specifically tackles, offensive tackles. Now, centers and guards you can find a little bit later. You can, but offensive tackles, those are 1st round guys. Defensive tackles, 1st round guys. Defensive end, most of them are 1st round guys. Dude, like I said, just off the top of my head, the only guy out there who's producing on a defensive line is like Max Crosby, who was a 4th round pick. There are not many examples of that. Like, there really aren't. When it comes to, this is why I was against drafting a wide receiver at pick 9, because right now I think Rome is the 6th best rookie wide receiver.
I think you might be lower than that.
And so I thought I just saw that stat last game, but it's not benefiting you much at all. And like, you can find guys in later rounds that'll produce just fine for you. So when you're talking about the drop off in production versus the drop off in draft capital and value spent, like, dude, to be able to pick a guy a couple rounds later and still get, I don't know, maybe even 80% of what Roman Dunze's doing is just fine. Just fine. Like, more likely you'll get something similar, if not better, even, because those guys are just all over the place. Like you said,
if you want a direct example, this team is doing it right in front of your eyes, and it's the Chargers. They have an old 1st round wide receiver, Quentin Johnson, who is pretty much a bust. They took a 2nd round wide receiver in Ladd McConkey. They took scrap heap running backs in Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins, and they invested everything in the offensive line. And yes, they've had a bit of a drop off towards the back end of the season, but with good coaching, a good quarterback, that's what this blueprint for this team is. We talk about blueprints for teams. We were hoping we were Buffalo. We were hoping we were the Eagles. We were hoping with this. Now your next blueprint to copy, it's not the Dolphins. It's not the best blueprint you can copy is the team that you should have been this year anyway, and it's the Chargers. You can be a good offensive line, mediocre talent at receivers. I don't want to see a goddamn investment at wide receiver other than a free agency pickup for a 3rd or 4th round guy or 6th or 7th round wide receiver. I don't want to sniff wide receiver. I do not care if Keenan Allen walks. I don't care if DJ Moore is upset in the offseason. I do not want to see any investment in talent position players this offseason, like whatsoever.
Dennis, I think that question is still yet to be, the answer to that still yet to be determined, because you do have to let the draft positions shake out. And then, I'd still have to do my research on some of these guys and whatnot to determine who would be available, where we're picking, and what would make the most sense. But just to entertain it, David,
and sorry, just one more thing that depends, not only draft order, who your next GM and coach are and what do they like to draft.
But just to entertain it, David, like, if you had to answer this question right now.
Areas of need, so here's the difference. If you're going left tackle, you are probably trading Braxton Jones, right? So if you're going that early, and in my early following of the draft shakeout and everything, the defensive line is a much stronger class this year than offensive line. So if you have like a top 5 pick and you can get that defensive tackle out of Michigan, I forgot his name. I think it's something Mason. Carl could easily correct us if he was here.
Carl's been jerking you off, hasn't he, about Michigan?
About Michigan, but no, he's like a top 5 generational prospect. You got Michigan, you got defensive ends, hybrid defensive ends. So if you get a guy like Vrabel and he wants to go into a 3-4, and there's like a hybrid defensive end that he loves that can stand ups, Graham, thank you, Dennis. It all depends. I think in terms of what your areas of need are, it's clearly offensive line, way more than it is defensive line. I also think that everybody healthy and depending on the defense you're running, your defensive line is pretty much there other than a second defensive end, right? So you're looking at you need a left tackle, you need a left guard, you need a center, you need a right guard. The only thing that's even semi-solidified is right tackle, and that's Darnell Wright, and he's been kind of up and down. So you need offensive line. And also in terms of just pure investment, people, what we've been just talking about for 30 minutes, we've been talking about protecting Caleb Williams. Nothing matters this offseason. Your most expensive offseason signing should be an offensive lineman. Your first investment at the draft should be an offensive lineman. And everything else can kind of fall by the wayside where it needs to fall. Because if he's going to keep getting hurt, then your wide receivers don't matter. Who the hell cares about where you draft wide receiver if he can't get him the ball because he's on the floor or if he's on the ground? So that's my point. It's just everything about offensive line this offseason.
Right. Like the way the situation was kind of constructed is kind of, I think the idea was similar to what the Seahawks did with Russell Wilson, where it's like, hey, you got this good defense. You're going to get this rookie in here and try and just ride it out through his rookie contract, but you're still going to be a defensive heavy team. However, you did draft 2 offensive players in the top 10, right? Quarterback and wide receiver this year. Dude, the way it's looking now is you're going to need to make that shift to be able to lean on that. And there's a timeline to this because at some point you got to pay Caleb. You have to make it work by then, period. Mm-hmm. Right? So, like, you already wasted that whole idea of the Seahawks, blueprint this year. It didn't happen. The defense will be nothing more than complimentary moving forward. You're not going to sit here and be like this defensive heavy team where you rely on defense and stuff like that. I think your picks should definitely go towards offensive line for sure. And like you said, all the focus should go towards offensive line. Dude, it's such a shit show. There is no consistency among these guys. Dude, are you handcuffed into signing Tevin Jenkins?
Not if you can get Trey Smith from Kansas City.
Okay. Can you enlighten me about that situation a little bit more? I'm not.
Kansas City's just in like a financial kind of hell at this point in terms of how much is heavy on their contract. Like if Travis Kelce retires, I think they get that off the books because he's got one more year. Patrick Mahomes costs a lot. They just pay a lot of players in different positions, and they do generally invest in offensive line. But I do believe that they just traded for. Who was it? Jacksonville released their left tackle. They signed him for a really, really expensive tackle. So Kansas City has their weakest part of their line is their left and right tackles. But they have a lot of money invested in both of those sides. So that's more than likely that he's one of the best guards in the league and he's going to have to walk. So,
okay. So you don't have to trade for him.
No. He's a fully unrestricted free agent. He's going to be just signing an absolute. You thought the guard contracts were ugly this offseason. I don't even care if it's $20 million a year to get like one of the top 3 guards in the league. Just do it. I mean, what else are you going to do?
You want to entertain Aunt Mass's question here?
Interior 3, both guards and center. I don't know nearly enough about it right now, Aunt Mass, and I'd have to do research and watch some bowl season. From what I've seen from like Todd McShay and Mel Kiper that I've started listening to, because this is about the time I started listening to a little bit more of that draft stuff, watch tape. I can't tell you for sure. The guys that I do know that are like top 5 bona fide is like the pass rusher from Penn State, defensive end or defensive tackle from Michigan and stuff like that. But I can't give you the offensive line info right now. The one thing I know statistically is you should never draft a center in the first round. So that's like a second or third round move. Other than that, I don't have the info for you as of right now.
Right. Yeah. For the most part, you're right. Listen, like you said, statistically, there's always outliers. You could always point to a center somewhere that was drafted in the first round that worked.